là. Alors, petit problème, voilà, mon petit frère a eu un petit problème dans son... Voilà, vu qu'il fait ses devoirs à la dernière minute, il a eu un petit problème et du coup j'ai dû aller l'aider.
Once you walk through that door, there will be no turning back.
Ça veut dire que ça mériterait peut-être une petite sauvegarde. Donc, et forcément, voilà. Du coup, ça fait une petite coupure dans la vidéo.
I should have died in 153. No home, no wealth. All I had was my younger sister. Now she's dead too. I intended to jump off the adamantine tower. That's what I thought. It would be a terrible thing to fall, she said. Celine II, my predecessor.
She's upstairs.
She gave me a reason to live. I had a purpose here in Project Purity. I was there in the Black Marsh when we unleashed the hissed weapon on the cleansers, causing the West Weld massacre. Celine II died in that battle against Corvus. That is where I became the de facto matriarch, even though Purity's true heir arose in the East. We had been abandoned, you see. It wasn't the first time Celine had died, nor will it be the last. Who was her reincarnation? It should be obvious. Before you strike me down, I want you to understand what it will take to reach Sky's Divide. You must kill her, just as she sent you to kill me. It's the only way you can complete your odyssey. Now, proceed. Is that what they call it? Only now, after the fall of the Empire, the Great War, do the gods decide to send us their hero. All of Tamriel waged war after bloody war for 2 centuries. Incalculable amounts of young and old lost, yet the gods turned a blind eye. But when lust was rank in the air, when serenity and old purity aspired to expose the stark reality, they decried it as obscene. She was right. We have no choice in the matter. Your final objective stands before you, ready to die for heresy. I am Matriarch Virgil of Project Purity, first Golden Maiden of Matari. You would listen to my final words.
Absolument. Si vous le parlez. C'est quoi ça, Matarine? C'est pas... Ok, c'est bon, je peux lui parler, du coup je vais faire une sauvegarde. Oui, évidemment, je vais l'écouter parler. Je vais peut-être pas tuer au final. Vigile de l'étoile, non?
You spoke with my sister, Ilone. I can only hope she did not suffer. We'll speak of my life later, if you're willing to grant an old woman solace prior to her passing. Now, do you understand what this has been about ever since the first attack on Jonestead? There was never meant to be a war between sirens and purity. Why would there be? This has been a game whose both sides were controlled by the same player. A woman I once served and swore an oath to obey. The one you now call both your enemy and mistress, without understanding why. You may not consider her a commander, yet here you are, executing her will. Even if your loyalty is feigned, you follow orders for the time being. Regardless of why you act, you must know the motivation behind her wishes and how it all started. It always begins with a woman and a lie. Selene the First, an Altmer noble, the founder of Project Purity and mastermind behind Eurosap, unknowingly slain by Martin Septim's champion. Istis, an Ashen warlord who brought her people to the brink of freedom, only to betray them to their Saesi masters so they may remain slaves left in want. Selene the Second, another Ashen, and the provocateur of the Purity Pinder War that drove both sides to ruin on a quest for vengeance. At last, Matari, the savior we have all been looking for to deliver us from a life of agony she manufactured under different personas.
Et pourquoi non?
To build an army.
Ouais, pourquoi faire?
This world is our arena and our prison. Men will wage wars over trivialities for eternity, on behalf of the gods and kings that neglected them to begin with. They will die in conflicts that will endure millennia, spanning across eras under different monikers. It will be this way until the end of time, until all that's left is silence. But if someone were to escape the cage and rise above prophecy and destiny, they will become something more than a mortal, more than a god. They will be alive. It was a trickster that created Mundus, and it shall be a trickster that destroys it. From the remains, a new world will be born, one not designed to suffer the horrors of even the most mundane lives. It would be an end to sorrow. Peace would be in abundance. At last, we would all be free. Project Purity and Serenity's sirens, brothers and sisters of war. The intellect of Purity combined with the strength of the sirens, both attributes required to bring about the end. Oh, so I thought.
Et la famille
The
Pinder?
Pinders, from the moment they were conceived, have been instruments. During our war, they served as a focal point for our aggression. For the sirens, they're portrayed as victims worthy of salvation. The sympathies of the Ashen toyed with in order to justify Matari's expansion.
La meute est formée pour des causes bien moindres pour tout ça.
It's only when you've seen the world through her eyes that you find yourself in a position to fight for something that transcends existence itself. She wanted us to feel what she feels, broken, prepared to become her ally in one final war, or a servant for a higher cause.
Elle a manipulé vos émotions.
We've become so accepting of the status quo, no amount of reasoning would have broken us out of our trance. We had to experience the absurdities firsthand. For Purity, it was the absurdity of the war with the Pinders, a conflict that at its core had no meaning. Its only purpose was to sate our appetite for revenge, an appetite that could never be fully quenched. The Ashen are immersed in insanity, hopelessly fighting for liberty in their distant homeland to this day. They will fail, as it is their destiny to fail, as they never had a presence in history, past or future. Time will render their suffering meaningless and their names forgotten. And for the Ashen Sirens in Tamriel, they will persevere, in a sense, by serving a new master, liberty. We may ask ourselves why we can never obtain what we fight for, but the answer is simple. Because it is impossible.
Qu'est-ce qui vous le fait croire?
I joined Purity at the end of the war with the Pinders. My heart and mind were untainted, but my brothers were not. I yearned to understand why they felt the way they did. My duties as matriarch prevented me from serving in the Great War, and Matari was too occupied with the formation of Serenity's Sirens. But I couldn't resist the call of Hammerfell. I exited that war a changed woman. Matari came to learn of my desertion, but it made no difference to her. I had completed my rite of passage and saw the truth.
Pourquoi choisir la guerre?
It's the only viable solution. Long ago, she believed rejecting the will of the gods would entail the destruction of their reality. Lust would have governed the land rather than war. Life would have continued its course of degradation all the same, but towards the opposite side of the spectrum. Eventually, men, in their infinite pursuits fueled by greed, would have repressed their memories of a life in which every day was to be cherished. And the meaning of excess was a foreign concept. The names of divinity abandoned, morality a broken chain, a diseased world left to be molded into something greater by the will of its new god.
C'est bon, si le projet Furtif avait réussi avec les enseignes dans la troisième ère, encore les actes.
It was not her intent by failing to expose the bigotry of divinity. The Et Ada, and even her spiritual descendants, you know as the Holy Matrons, they all rejected her vision. These same deities that confined mortals to a cycle of violence, some of whom reigned over their own realms of indulgence, either rose their hands against my former mistress or declared a stance of apathy. Why? Because the new world wouldn't be theirs to control. The heroine of that age executed their commands unwittingly and killed Selene I. And what was her reward? Godhood, along with all of its shackles. He now basks in madness, waxing nostalgic over the life he once lived as a mortal. Would he prefer to live life as a hero? No one can say for certain. But he would be remiss to have forgotten the sorrows we endure that outweigh those of a god.
Pourquoi les actes de violence maintenant avec les différents?
It is the natural order. She detests war as much as she loathes the rampant fornication stimulated by her creations.
Les servantes dorées?
Among other abominations. To limit yourself to an ideal would be arrogant, and her mind values logic and reason over integrity. She uses war as a means to end all war. The very thing championed by gods will be turned against them, while still adhering to their sacred visions of the future. Her sirens would systematically dismantle the towers of royalty by song and bloodshed. For as many years as it would take, states and institutions would fall in a rapid succession that outpaces the recovery. It's a fate that will befall us, with or without her presence, as soothsayers, war poets, and the Elder Scrolls declare in usual ambiguous fashion. That certainty is a loophole to be exploited, and she substitutes key components of the end times so that it may arrive by her will. If the world dies by her will, it shall be reborn with her as its creator.
Vous appréciez le ciné, mais vous n'avez toujours pas dit pourquoi vous avez trahi votre police.
Because she's a liar. You of all people must have heard its echoes in the void. Calling it a soul would be understating its magnificence, but it's the only word in our language that comes closest to describing it. Matari and all the avatars that preceded her answer to the raw source of knowledge and power that is imprisoned in the darkness. Salaquine. Salaquine cannot be defined by a dichotomy of benevolence. She's compelled by an intense primal instinct to have her physical and incorporeal states reunited. Her detainment is administered by the same forces that can only be undone through destruction. Whether her disciples ascend to the higher plane or are rewarded with paradise is peripheral. Salaquine will resort to any measure to secure victory, even if it means sacrificing us all. I refused to allow that possibility. I chose purity.
L'Atlas n'était pas celui que vous croyez.
You need not show it to me. I was a fool to believe we were alone in our crusade. I'd become too trusting of all who wore the white robe and forgot that personal prejudices and devotions to external causes are impossible to fully suppress. Even if I'd forgiven his kind for their crimes, he did not reciprocate.
En tout cas, c'était perdu, même si je m'en étais pas mêlé.
So it would seem. The Hist would have proven to be a much cleaner effort than a war, but she abandoned it in favor of the Sirens, for reasons I don't understand. When all had died under its thick veil, we would assume the throne of creation and conjure an existence determined by the many.
Moi, j'étais supposé savoir tout ça.
Do you presume you were meant to?
Dis-moi, pourquoi je portais, je n'ai rencontré, aurait pu me dire.
Why would they speak?
J'aurais pu ou pas.
If events had flown differently back then, maybe you would have come to us first. Or we to you. When we learned that a woman had defeated Bosca at Jonstead, we thought nothing of it. But when we learned your identity, it was already too late. You had joined her. After all I've said, you still don't understand. The audacity you have is infuriating, but I cannot hate you. To blame you for a fault that is not willingly your own, one that is part of your inherent design, is unjust. Salaquine knows this. Thousands of years walking amongst mortals in the form of avatars, learning their strengths, their deficiencies, has made her aware of the mechanisms that threaten her ascension. She is not the reckless adversary of songs and legends who fall without effort. She knows you better than you know yourself, hero. She will break you. I've said enough. Kill me and go. Go and murder your mistress. Her death will grant you passage to Sky's Divide. It does not matter. This will end on the Dwemer Fortress Island in the north, one way or another. Not anymore. If you have lingering questions, ask them now.
Oui.
One day you will depart from this world. And on your death knell, I want you to know that your life was that of a pawn, nothing more. I don't mean to antagonize you or belittle your character. There's peace in truth. Would you rather die in ignorance, not knowing you lived a lie?
Tout ce que vous m'avez dit, vous pouvez...
No, it cannot. A line has been crossed. You're on an irreversible course towards fate's limits. No matter what happened or will happen, I'll always have more faith in Salaquine than in you, agent of fate. Nobody is perfect. Her avatar, Matari, may have made countless miscalculations, of which we'll never know. The most glorious strategies all have the capacity for failure, due to their sheer complexity. For the sake of us all, I hope hers doesn't. Not only have I never been to the Divide, it's also a sacred subject my former mistress wouldn't want me to discuss in great detail. A piece of advice before you strangle my throat for information. Void constructs roam the island freely. If you rely purely on magic, then I advise you to leave the heroes to deal with the machines.
Les héros semblent avoir trouvé un moyen de les contrôler.
For now.
Ok, dérangé.
You would ask something of me. Towards what ends would knowledge of my life serve you? The story of my life isn't worth sharing. After all, ever since I met her on the tower, I've been a dead woman. My new life is purity.
Pas loin de la résistance dans l'enclume.
I will never speak of those days. The nightmares will die with me. I will not speak. I did not practice the same tactics as the Ashen Harpies. They're attributed to lust. For me, it is war. My position in the Order of the Golden Maidens lost value as Matari returned from her voyages to Akavir with new members in tow. She kept me in the Order as a memento of my servitude to Celine and as proof of confidence. My task was to lead purity, and theirs was to protect the mistress. I was occupying a valuable position from afar. I suspect the woman known as Freya was granted significant power to pick up my slack and appease the maidens at Euphoria. There can only be 5 maidens at a time. It is a necessary rule Salaquine's avatars must abide by. Yes, before purity, sculpting was my tradecraft in Sentinel. It's only a hobby these days. It was a commissioned work from Atari. It's the best depiction of her primordial avatar I could muster, based on its brief appearance in the marsh where Celine died.
Et comment elle va venir au palais?
By way of Matari's teleportation. As blasphemous as it is to some, that spell has its uses. Elone, my beloved sister, is dead. A sacrifice I was willing to make to prove my loyalty to our cause. It had been so long since I last saw her. We exchanged letters. While hers offered comfort, mine were filled with lies and soulless stipends. She wanted a family, but couldn't conceive. She found happiness nonetheless in Jonestead alongside her husband. I did what I thought was right, and for a cause I believed would make us all happy. She's in a better place now, Not on this celestial body. Proceed.
J'en ai du blabla à faire encore.
They've all been decommissioned. All that's left is innocence and the two that have been gifted to the sirens. Innocence, once known as Moloch Khan, will remain as it always was, a myth. Only the intrepid explorers will find it, and even they will not be able to resist keeping it a secret. High Splendor, on the other hand, will crumble. Without its creator or her favorite guardians to tend its lush gardens, it will eventually merge back with the void. It was built using our resources, a prison for slaves, its purpose fulfilled 2 centuries later by Matari. It is a hive of decadence. The flies swarm to its poisoned mounds of honey. Realizing only in their dying moments they'd been lured into a trap. A defenseless stronghold leaving its guardians in a perpetual state of insecurity, a fear of war that remained elusive for decades. It also served as a bog of misinformation. Disconnected from the palace, it's where Matari claimed Zell resided, and where Serenity was heralded as an icon that could not be shown to the people, for she was a fraud. I still remember the day when we laid explosives at her shrine. It was my one assignment outside of Purity, and the only time I met the other maidens. I don't understand what Matari wanted to transpire out of us working together. Perhaps she needed to show them proof of my existence. Proceed.
Oh, mais il y a des trucs qui sont apparus.
I will only speak of Selene the First onwards. I'm not familiar with those that preceded her. Selene the First founded Project Purity upon the prejudices and misgivings of other guilds. Her first followers were promised unfettered teachings of all schools of magic and alchemy. Their descent into the forbidden arts is what made Erosap seem so natural to their perverted minds. Selene the First died by her own accord, and in a last, desperate attempt, appeared in Valhalla to stop Serenity's surge towards Pazaroth. It is where her primordial avatar was vanquished by the hero of Kavach. The gods had bested Salaquine, and Erosap died shortly thereafter. There is little I know about Istis. The Ashen revile her and would erase all evidence of her existence if they could. Her very name has entered their lexicon as an expletive. I know she was an Ashen warlord that arose in Akavir following Selene I's death. She fought in the bloodiest campaigns of the early Fourth Era until she surrendered the locations of the Ashen Resistance's greatest leaders to the Sayesi. She never intended to emancipate an entire culture. She fought for their trust so she could put an end to an otherwise successful rebellion. My mistress, for a brief time. She spurred purity towards war and disposed of the old ideals of might through alchemy. The technical prowess of Purity's scholars brought forth many curios during her reign, but Selene II only cared about how they were used. Selene II's methodology for attacking the Pindars is difficult to explain in a concise manner. She moved her sons about the board methodically. Every blow to the Pinders was measured. Strike too hard, and they are outright defeated. Strike too soft, and purity assets are lost. Assets. That's all we were to her. Selene II wanted to raise an army out of the Pinders. It took decades for the cleansers to be born, yet it wasn't what she desired. I will never understand how Purity managed 118 years of fighting that only came in short bursts. Neither will I understand the full scope of Selene's plan. But war changes people, and I was only there for the final 3 years. She died in the Black Marsh, harvesting hist sap. Perhaps that failure altered the course of her future as Matari.
Ah, c'est incroyable, c'était la même.
Selene, her first, it is where
Le même
her
personnage chaque fois.
my statue captures its essence. It is the shell of a woman, nothing more. You should ask her this yourself. Then know that Matari is not the most glorious of avatars, but it's one of Salaquine's last. The end approaches, and her role is to tie up loose ends. You may not have been present for her mortal birth in the jungles of Akavir, but you will be there for her death as a god. Proceed. There are many. We should make it brief. In conjunction with Purity, they had their value. Alone, they're nothing more than another boorish band of mercenaries. The father of the tribe now has them holed up on an island, knowing the futility of their ridiculous quest of honor, justice, and every other cliché in their limited vocabulary. Everything I told you. Serenity's Sirens is a shadow of its former self. Forget their history. They serve no Pinder legacy. For all intents and purposes, they are an Ashen army, along with a few Tamrielic stragglers conditioned to serve the Great Mistress. Matari needed to re-establish old connections with the Ashen, and the expeditions to Akavir took decades. She needed something to occupy Marcus's attention in the interim. Tales of an enigmatic woman taking in Ashen under her wing have reached the heart of Akavir. The folly of worshipping idols has been overlooked by the gullible children. History has repeated. Again, they serve the same entity that damns their race to slavery. Ashen cry out for vengeance against the ephemeral oppressor, a label that can be applied to many things, from Sayesi to lore. The siren call of Matari will rally them to her side if she ever has a need of their service. Ashen are Akaviri, and they will fight like Akaviri. It's in their nature, masked and too easily dismissed by arrogant mortals focused on appearances. They will deem you a heretic, spouting vitriol about their mistress. What difference does it make whether they live or die? There are no records of the Akaviri race known as the Ashen. Some would say they never even existed. I'm not familiar with this woman. She joined after access to information on the Sirens was severely reduced by Matari in the past decade. If it is true she serves as her right hand, I have a supposition on her identity, but I will reveal nothing.
Ouais, c'est un...
She may prove to be an instrumental piece in Matari's plans.
un Daedra.
They are a curious lot, but I'd never consider attempting to understand their ways. We thought the Void Knights had severed their connection to Nirn. Obviously that is no longer the case. Perhaps the Knights were not the sole cause of their abandonment of the Pinda family. Maybe there's a schism tearing their culture apart. Celine spoke to me of revolution. She said nothing beyond that word. I wouldn't be fixated on Serenity. She is a relic of a turbulent age whose lessons have been rendered obsolete in recent years. The Observer you speak of is someone I believe would enjoy having Matari's plans go awry. Why she pushes you toward Matari is perplexing. A disciple. Only time will tell. Insignificant. Do not mind them. The Pinders are expired and will never again be pawns. They've earned their rest. I already stated that the Pinders earned their rest. Proceed. If it's knowledge you crave. Our history is over 2 centuries old. There are books in the archives that chronicle our rise and our fall. Seek them out. My recounting would not do my sons justice. Habits are durable. Abolishing harmless traditions would more likely interrupt lifelong routines. I've considered allowing women into purity, but Matari has eyes everywhere on the outside. The recruitment process would have been a tremendous risk. The great shame only served to remove physical evidence of our pasts. It was a period I ushered in after Matari returned from her final trip to Akavir in 190. Matari was fully occupied with the Sirens in their newly relocated main base, Euphoria Palace. There was absolutely no chance she would return to innocence, so I had all questionable artifacts of our past destroyed and smelted. It's also when development on the lethal variant of the hist toxin began. Advanced weapons of foreign design from Celine's mind that were used during the Pinder War. They had to be destroyed no matter their strategic value. They were impeding our concentration on the metaphysical aspect of our cause. Atlas said, if we ever had the opportunity to capture you, we should take it. Suppressing one like you is more feasible than an assassination. Assassinations never work. Here you are, as he intended, doing his work along with Matari's, purifying innocence of all its souls. All these years, I considered him to be my closest ally and a friend. In hindsight, I should have known that I would be betrayed in turn by someone, if not myself. Karmic retribution from Salaquine, I imagine. It was not my call. Atlas negotiated a deal with Bosca for additional men to defend innocence. I wasn't aware they wouldn't be men at all. We're virtually defenseless against void automatons. They absorb all magical attacks. My death will be felt by all of Purity's sons. The lost will take their own lives before Matari's Sirens arrive to deliver a cruel punishment. Those who'd rather live for a while longer will flee this place as fast as they can. Their destinations will be unknown until they're fatigued. Purity will live on in their hearts as a figment of the past best left where it belongs.
C'est vraiment la fin du projet pureté.
I will answer. Don't be ridiculous. Mistress Matari would not be pleased with either of us. I can't believe you're doing this. The exit is reopened. Leave. You and any allies that remain in innocence will be teleported back to the surface. I'll leave. Leave. I will answer. My words could only delay it for so long. All right, end it.
Je sais pas quoi faire.
Speak. Don't be ridiculous. Mistress Matari would not be pleased with either of us. I can't believe you're doing this. The exit is reopened. Leave. You and any allies that remain in innocence will be teleported back to the surface. I'll leave. Leave. What will I do? I'm finally going home. What will I do? I'll manage. I'd be more concerned about yourself. Godspeed.
Putain, en fait, ça me saoule parce que je sais pas si c'est une bonne chose ou pas de la buter.
Go. What will I do? Mistress always said silence was golden. Godspeed, Dragonborn. Godspeed.
Je sais pas si c'était une bonne idée de la tuer. Vous atteindre niveau 2, vous réalisez que vous avez saisi le secret du succès. Concentration, présence de matériel.
Is it over?
Et le projet pureté n'est plus.
Haha! You're one of a kind, Commander. The sisters back at the palace will be jumping for joy. Can't believe it. One warrior taking down all of purity from within. Ah, the tales we'll weave out of this one. Now our work begins.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça?
Map of Innocence. Snagged it from a purity agent a while back, but it got lost in the shuffle. A real kick in the stomach for you, I bet. Probably didn't need it anyway. Mistress Matari wants us to secure the stronghold. We're going to clean up any remnant agents and then take care of the hissed weapon.
Ok, cool. Vous inquiétez pour lui, j'ai mis le générateur en salle de stockage en surcharge.
You blew it all up?
Absolument.
Okay, not what we had in mind, but at least it cuts down on our workload. How are we going to deal with Lilith now?
Bon, on la supprime pas. C'est prévu quoi?
She was going to help move the hissed. Her idea. Now I'm not so sure. Nah, we'll find some use. Tell them to save at least some of the fine imports back at the palace for when we get back. Thanks again, Commander. You should be damn proud about what you achieved here.
Attendez.
Je peux vous aider?
Trust me. Let us through.
Je peux vous aider? Is it over? Can't. Now our work begins. Map of it. A real kick. Mistress Matari wants. You. Okay. She was going to help move the hissed. Her idea. Now I'm not so sure. Nah, we'll find some use. Oh, we'll be keeping a close eye on her. She tries anything and we'll pepper her with arrows. This is her resting place anyway. No point in taking her back to Pazarath. Nope. Whole party is with me. Malene and Samantha got last-minute orders to take care of some business in Dawnstar. There was this dark elf too. I think she's with them? I don't know. Never hurts to have some extra arsenal in our back pockets. Don't know where it would have gone. All we were told was to take it to the Great Lift down in the Purity Work Facility. The tunnel network that's connected to opens up at the coastline. Maybe Cordinali? Whatever. Not my business. I can't believe it. I can't believe that you, of all people, would say that about Mistress Matari, about the woman that saved us all. Wait a minute. You defeated Purity. Alone. No. I'll be damned. I knew you were in on it. Sirens, we have a traitor to put down. Is it over? Can't. Now our work begins. Map of it. A real kick. Mistress Matari wants. You. Okay. Not. She was going to help move the hissed. Her idea. Now I'm not so sure. Nah, we'll find some use. Huh? Why's that? Tell them to save at least some of the fine imports back at the palace. Thanks again, Commander. You should be...
Mais du coup, elle est où Lilith là?
You didn't have to do that. I convinced them to keep me alive so I could help them. The moment I had chance, I'd have done the same. Thank you. I know. We'll leave for the divide right away.
Je sais pas quoi faire, ça commence à me casser les couilles, putain. En fait, vu que j'ai fait tous les optionnels, je sais pas comment...
Is it over? Can't believe. Now our work begins. Map of it. A real. Mistress Matari wants us to. You blew. Okay, not what. She was going to help. Tell them to save it. Thanks again.
Ah ouais, j'avais mis un truc 3D, ça marche plutôt bien. Je suis un peu emmerdé parce que j'aimerais bien que Lilith se libère en quelque sorte. Alors n'oublions pas que du coup nous avons un allié qui s'échappe avec nous. Je suis un peu baisé. Ce qui va se passer, je pense, c'est que je vais faire en parallèle de cette histoire, l'histoire principale. Je crée une nouvelle sauvegarde ici. Je vais retourner à bord de ciel où je vais tuer les meufs et libérer Lilith. Et je vais voir en fait si elle arrive à se libérer, puisque je suis d'accord que là, les 3 filles, j'en ai rien à foutre. Parce qu'elle dit qu'elle va se libérer toute seule, j'aimerais bien que ça se fasse, mais... Plaira.
You didn't have to do that. I convinced them to keep me alive so I could help them. The moment I had the chance, I'd have done the same. Thank you. I know. We'll leave for the divide right away. Something happened down there at Purity. What they said, do you believe them? There's something different. Meet me in Dawnstar. I'll be there trying to procure a ship, while you deal with Matari. If they're not urgent, save them for later. There's a better place for us to talk than up here with the dead sirens laying around. You know what you're doing. If killing Matari now, somehow, at the palace is mandatory, then I believe you. After wiping out all of Purity on your own, you don't need my help. Besides, one of us needs to prepare for the journey ahead. Good. I mean, Dragonborn. No need for ranks now that we've gone rogue. Promise me that if it comes down to saving my life again, or stopping Matari, you won't let emotions get in the way. The mission comes first. One person is nothing compared to what's at stake. Thank you. May the divines guide you to victory.
Alors, je vais essayer de faire les deux trucs en parallèle. Ça risque d'être plus long, mais si le résultat à la fin est le même, je préfère sauver de très loin Lilith. J'ai l'impression que dans les deux cas ça va être le même truc et du coup je préférerais peut-être sauver Lilith. Et puis après j'irai certainement voir le bateau de Dimitri. Vous prenez pour qui en fait bien compris. Pardon. Un genou en fait. Fallait pas te rater gros. Donc on a la sauvegarde ici et la sauvegarde ici, voilà. En espérant en tout cas que cette vidéo vous a plu, j'ai vraiment kiffé faire avec vous et c'est aussi la prochaine vidéo. C'était vraiment très sympathique. Donc voilà, on se dit tout simplement dans une prochaine vidéo. Bye.